Hello and welcome back to goldstocktrades.com. Today we have a new and special guest with us, Mark Henderson. Mark is CEO of Laramide Resources. Laramide can be traded as LAM on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and it also can be traded as LMRXF on the OTC BB. Thanks, Mark, for being here with us today.
Oh, my pleasure, Jim.
Mark, tell us about your background and how long you've been working on the Laramide Resources story, and how long you've been working in the uranium sector.
Well, I've had sort of two waves of working in uraniums. I had an initial interest back in the late 90s when I first learned about the uranium business, the nuclear business in general, and the role nuclear power played in the world, and got quite excited about it. As it turned out, that was a little premature. We had a little sort of rally for about 18 months in that period of time, and then the uranium went back and sort of completed the long bear market that it had from the early 1980s, and then until it got going again in the mid-2000s. And then the second wave here is when we acquired a project in Australia, a very significant project that I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about, called Westmoreland, and then that's really been the focus for the last decade or so.
Mark, there have been major developments in Australia that are going to significantly impact the development of your Westmoreland project. Could you update us on those developments in Australia?
Sure, I'd be glad to do that. The big thing in Australia, Jeb, is that the country has an incredible natural geological endowment of uranium resources, and traditionally it sort of hadn't pulled its weight. They probably had 30 to 40% of the globally known uranium deposits that were commercial in the world, yet were only producing less than 20% in terms of their contribution to global mine supply. And part of that was this political process that they had between the two political parties in Australia, the Labor Party being the traditional sort of left-wing party, and the Liberals being the right-wing party. And the Labor Party traditionally, because they'd been heavily supported by green interests and what have you, had adopted a very anti-nuclear stance. I mean, partly this was related to things that went on with the nuclear testing and what have you in the South Pacific, and it's taken a long time for them to get past that. The positive news now is that both parties in Australia have effectively adopted similar policies towards the uranium business and the nuclear business in general globally, although the Labor Party still in Australia is not interested in actually building nuclear power plants within Australia.
Mark, talk to us about your Westmoreland project and how the recent developments could help the advancement of this project into production.
Certainly. Just to follow on the previous answer, the big issue with the permitting of these projects was that the permitting, like in many jurisdictions, is done more at the local level. So in Australia, all your permitting is done at the state level. And there were states, in particular Queensland, where our project is located, and in Western Australia, which is where most of those big iron ore mines and what have you are located. Those two states were, for the longest period of time, Labor Party strongholds, and they were heavily opposed to uranium mining. What's happened now is that with the policy disappearing at the federal level and with Liberal Party running those two states, effectively there is no opposition anymore to the building of uranium mines in either Western Australia or Queensland. So in terms of us having a clear runway in order to get our project up and running, the politics are about as positive as they could be.
Let's talk about the Westmoreland asset. There's very few deposits like this controlled in the junior uranium sector. Can you tell us what's so unique about this deposit?
Well, first, what's unique about it, I think, is there's really three attributes. Number one, it's obviously in what we think now clearly is a very good political jurisdiction. I mean, the uranium endowment in the world is concentrated in fairly small number of countries. Some of those countries are in places that, you may or may not want to go to, or you may or may not be welcome, such as Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, etc., various parts of Africa that present some more development challenges. So anything in what's deemed to be sort of a first world rule of law country is highly desirable because the uranium business is heavily based on contracts. Utilities want long-term certainty of supply, and the business is very much a contractual business. So that's number one. The other thing it has is scale. It's a project that can produce potentially up to, we think, 4 to 5 million pounds a year for a decade or more. And there are very few uranium mines in the world today that do that. If we put it in at that scale, it would be instantly a top 10 uranium mine globally. And the third thing is where it sits on the cost curve, because and the rule of thumb for any commodity producer is really the strategy is always to try and be in the lowest part of the cost curve. That insulates you against any kind of downturns. And this project does that because of the nature of the project, which is amenable to open pit mining and has quite good grade relative to the grades of other similar deposits. So it really has those three unique attributes, and that really puts it in a distinct class of its own as well.
Mark, why is uranium mining so crucial for Australia over the next decade or so?
Well, I think one thing that's happened with the policy change, and the government, of both these parties has clearly gone to great lengths to try and encourage the potential for uranium to pull its own weight, as I said earlier, in this business. I think they realize that they have a natural competitive advantage potentially as a uranium supplier of choice, and I think they would like to encourage that business longer term. Now, Australia, like Canada, where I'm based, we appreciate the value of resources and the value that resources contribute to GDP, et cetera. But in Australia, I think they would like to encourage this business in part to diversify away from things like coal, because the coal business, notwithstanding the optics of the coal business, et cetera, especially thermal coal, and the impact that has both on CO2 and on pollution and what have you in places like China, I think from a diversification standpoint, they realize that this is a commodity that probably has a very good, secure future over a long period of time. And I think from a standpoint of diversifying their mix of resource bases that are tax-paying significant entities within the country, I think that they see uranium as an up-and-comer, if you will, along with things like lithium and rare earths and some smaller contributors on the resource side.
Mark, we've seen a resurgence of interest in the uranium sector. The uranium price has begun to rebound off of 8-year lows. We're seeing also the psychology on the sector turning positive. How can investors, what should they look for on capitalizing on this return of a rebound in the uranium sector, specifically in Australia?
Well, within Australia, you've probably got a sector that's made up of maybe 8 to 10 companies that are pretty well recognized, that have deposits that matter potentially to the development pipeline. We obviously put ourselves in that group. There are some others. Most of the others in Australia trade solely on the ASX, which is the Australian Stock Exchange in Sydney. We're one of the few that's cross-listed. From the standpoint of uranium stocks generally, I mean, the historical trend has been that the real bellwether stock, of course, is Cameco, a very well-known big cap company here in Canada. Typically, when you start to see performance in Cameco, and then now there's a sort of an equivalent of a ETF, which just holds physical uranium, symbol U on Toronto. When those start to do better, I think that you immediately see, or quite soon after those stocks start performing or outperforming the market generally, you'll start to see the trickle down into the smaller names and the development names. And I think that particular trend is going to be exacerbated with the next time we have a significant bull run in uranium, because there's been an enormous call, if you will, in the number of names in the uranium that are active uranium companies. In the boom that we saw in the 2000s, which was particularly in the period sort of 05 to late 07, we went from almost no companies to probably over 700 companies that were dedicated to uranium, listed in both Toronto and Australia. I would say we're probably down to a number that is less than 25 now. And so all that money that wants to participate in the sector is going to have far, far fewer choices this time around than it had in the previous run.
Well, Mark, talk to us about some of your goals and on the Westmoreland project in 2014.
Our number one goal for 2014 is to get the project into the permit pipeline with the government entities in Queensland. We've done all the baseline work and what have you necessary now to create the initial applications for that, and we want to get in the permitting queue, if you will. It's going to be at least a 2-year permitting process, and then obviously you've got some construction and what have you. But we think the project will be timed to come online just when most market experts think there'll be a particularly acute deficit between newly mined production and the demand side from the utilities. So that's our goal, really, is to get that pushed forward as quickly as we can now. We obviously are very enthusiastic about the political landscape that we have available to us now in Queensland, and we definitely want to take advantage of it.
Well, Mark Henderson, CEO of Laramide Resources, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure, Jeb. Anytime.